Yeah, he's got to get up and recover. That's some super.
Woo! Yeah, man, you seen that? That was the young British heavyweight sensation Moses Itauma. And while these performances like this have garnered the attention of many and gained him high praise and even comparisons to this guy, yeah, that would be Mike Tyson, right? The great Iron Mike, you know, and former champions like David Haye have said this about Moses Itauma.
That's what you want to see in the future champ.
Every time you come to Saudi Arabia, you seem to get another world champion that's giving you the acknowledgement because they're seeing the raw skills.
And not just that, even one of the best heavyweights of this current iteration of heavyweights, Tyson Fury, have bestowed heavy praise on Moses Itauma as well, saying this. Now, while I'm not saying I disagree with these praises, right, and these declarations of greatness, I would want to give you some cautionary tales, right? Well, Tyson Fury said this about another guy who he proclaimed as a next up-and-coming heavyweight or future champion in the heavyweight division.
This is the future champ right here. I said it 3 years ago. This is the heir to the throne, guys. You better believe it.
Yeah, that would be Jared Anderson. And then this happened.
There's going to be another uppercut. Is this the end of Anderson?
Yep, you guessed it. The great badman out of the Democratic of Congo, Martin Bakoli, got to him and rocked the baby to sleep, right? And then check this out, man. Here's another guy right here that they call Johnny Fisher, aka Bosch, aka the Romford Bull. Well, check this out.
Can he follow up? Fisher to come in, his legs are gone.
Yeah, he got boshed,
the
and bulldozed by the journeyman David Allen. So what I would say about that is this, man. I'm not saying that these comparisons aren't appropriate, but I am saying that maybe we should slow down when we make these premature statements and be careful with who we put them in the ring with next. So let's discuss. Is Moses Itauma the real future of the heavyweight division and he's legitimate? Or do we need to just slow down and let him progress a little more naturally? I'm kind of leaning towards the latter.
If I tell you I'm good, probably you will say I'm boasting. But if I tell you I'm no good, you know one line.
Yo, what's good, Boxing Talk family? It's your boy, Dr. Boxing Talk, back for another YouTube video. Banger, man. Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. I know what time it is. The doctor's in the house, man. So check this out. So as you saw from the intro, man, Moses Itauma, I really think that he is the goods, man. He looks legit, you know, but a lot of us, including myself, are not really convinced that he is what they claim he is to be, right? Because I will say this, you know, Moses Itauma, let's just look at what he's done so far. He just beat a guy named Mike Balogun.
Who the fuck is that guy? Who the fuck is that? No damn well who I am. Who the fuck is that?
And he looked phenomenal against him, right? But the fact of the matter is, this guy is a relatively unknown guy and he's in his 40s.
Damn. I'm sorry.
And he's a former NFL linebacker. Yeah, he played football, right? So that doesn't necessarily dismiss his performance, because I think his performance is great, and I have to give kudos to anybody that could do what they're anticipated to do or they're supposed to do, right? So I got to give him credit for that. However, when we say, oh, he's doing this and that, we're comparing him to other greats, I think we got to slow down and just be fair, right, in our critiques in favor of the person and against them, you know, when we're being complimentary and when we're being critical. You know, Moses Itauma just hasn't had anybody that's a high caliber opponent yet. Even his opponent before, Mike Balogun, Dempsey McKean, he stopped him in impressive fashion again. But quite frankly, that's what he's supposed to do against relatively unknown guys. He just doesn't have the resume to justify these comparisons. Now, his next fight, according to Frank Warren, who's his promoter and his manager and stuff like that, they're saying that they want him to have a major step up, even potentially fighting Martin Bakoli, right? And that's why we had Martin Bakoli before, because Jared Anderson, you know, another guy that was proclaimed as a future of the heavyweight division, you know, he ran into Bakoli a little bit too early, and he was warned by his promoter, Bob Arum, Top Rank, not to go for the fight. But, you know, he wanted to chase the big money opportunity and even legacy too, because if he could beat Martin Bakoli, that would have been an impressive feat as well. But Jared "Big Baby" Anderson, I could argue he had a better resume at that point, right? I'm not saying Charles Martin is the best heavyweight, but at least he's a former champion. Jared Anderson shared the ring with him, and it was a little shaky performance, but at least he got that experience from a guy who's been at the top level, right? Even his opponent, Riyad Marai, right? He was a former cruiserweight regular champion, you know, and Moses Itauma at this point, he just doesn't have that. And Jared Anderson had this experience before going against a contender, the Badman, the Congolese, Martin Bakoli. He had this experience before fighting him. So right now, Moses Itauma doesn't have any experience in the ring on the professional stage. Now, I'm not talking about sparring, but in the professional ranks on the biggest stage, he doesn't have that experience with a champion or a former champion, you know, or a top competition. So him going to fight a Martin Bakoli or a Joseph Parker or a Philip Hergovich, who's been in the ring with other top guys and have been former champions or current champions, you know, interim champions of Joseph Parker themselves, then, you know, you got to be a little apprehensive about it, you know, a little worried. I think that his career right now is progressing naturally as a young champion that he is. But with him being ranked #1 in the WBO, which he is, right behind Joseph Parker, who's the interim champion, and, you know, Alexander Usyk is a champion, well, then it is expected for him to step up in competition, you know, but I don't think that he should make such a large jump. I'm not saying that he can't beat Bakoli. I'm not saying he can't beat Hergovich or any other top contender, you know what I'm saying? Like, who else did they compare? Joseph Parker or even Ajit Kabayel. I think that would be too much for him, but he could possibly win. However, I think that the steep jump in competition going from a Dempsey McKean or a Mike Balogun to a Martin Bakoli, I think that's too wide of a gap, man. And case in point, look at Johnny Fisher, right? Johnny Fisher, he hasn't been in there with anybody of too much consequence. No disrespect to his opponents, but he looked good against Alan Babic. But is that really him looking good, or is he just a beneficiary of great matchmaking? You know, I think it's more of the latter, right? And then when he fought a pedestrian, no disrespect, you know, but Dave Allen is not a top caliber guy. He's been in there with some top guys, but he always came up on the short end or the losing end, right? And he's fresh out of rehab. Shout out to him, man. I think Dave Allen is a great story. Shout out to Dave Allen. But as far as being a high caliber opposition, let's face it, Johnny Fisher should not have lost to him. And then he got away with being the beneficiary of a robbery, right? The first time they fought, because let's face it, Dave Allen also beat him then too. And then the second time they fought, even though shout out to Dave Allen, he didn't want to do it to the young man. He said, man, I don't want to mess up his career. Well, they did it. They insisted and he obliged. And then what happened? He didn't leave it to the judges, man. He stopped him.
Damn. I'm sorry.
In dramatic and devastating fashion too. So shout out to Dave Allen, but I'm just saying that even with Johnny Fisher, it didn't seem like a wide gap in competition as far as how stiff the competition was. But even that jump between a guy like Alan Babic and Dave Allen was enough to show us that, man, Johnny Fisher didn't really have it. So what I'm saying is this: when you think about Johnny Fisher, a young upstart, and Jared B. Baby Anderson, another young upstart, when you just translate that to Moses Itauma, whether Moses Itauma is better than them or not, which I think he is better than both of them, but that's really inconsequential. My point is that I think that he should go and fight next like a Jermaine Franklin or a Otto Wallen, because while they are better than Mike Balogun and better than Dempsey McKean, it's not such a super huge jump in competition to where it wouldn't be considered a progressive step in his career development. If you can't just go from a hill, from climbing hills to go to Mount Everest, and Mount Everest would be Martin Bakoli, Ajit Kabayels, Joseph Parker, Philip Hergovich. You know, if you're fighting and you're climbing these little hills like a Mike Balogun or a Dempsey McKean, then I think naturally you should go to a little steeper hill, you know, maybe even a small mountain, and which is representative by Otto Wallen, who shared the ring with Anthony Joshua and Derek Chisora and other guys like that, you know, and Tyson Fury. Or you go and fight a guy like Jermaine Franklin, who also shared the ring with other top contenders, and then it gives a fair measuring stick and experience at the same time, you know, simultaneously, as opposed to just making such a stiff jump and then you mess up and end up on your back, and now we forget about you and say how overrated you are. So in my personal opinion, it's not that Moses Itauma is not the goods or the future of the heavyweight division like David Haye and Tyson Fury and so many others proclaim. That's inconsequential. What I think is more important is that you carry along a young boxer, especially in a brutal sport, carry them along progressively so they could develop, as opposed to just throwing them in to the fire and then seeing if they come out on top or they, you know, or they drown. You know, I don't think that it's necessary to put them in a sink or swim situation right now, 20 years old. I would say get like 1 or 2 more fights, maybe a Otto Wallen, maybe a Jermaine Franklin, hell, maybe even a Guido Vianello, right? He fought another up and coming heavyweight prospect in Richard Torres Jr., right? Even a Guido Vianello fight would be good, or even Moses Itauma versus Richard Torres Jr. And you know what's crazy about that? The American prospect, similar to Jared Anderson, Richard Torres Jr., you could argue that Richard Torres Jr. at this point has had a better a level of opposition than Johnny Fisher and Moses Itauma and his other English heavyweight counterparts, you know what I'm saying, the young prospects up and coming, right? Richard Torres Jr., he's a former Olympian, and he just beat Guido Vianello. Guido Vianello was in the ring with Efe Ajagba. Some people argue that the Italian beat the Nigerian Efe Ajagba, you know, but Efe Ajagba came out on top, and then Guido Vianello also beat Arslanbek Makhmadov, right? So if you look at those level of competition, when Richard Torres Jr. beat Guido Vianello, his opposition is better than Moses Itamas and Johnny Fisher's right now. You know what I'm saying? I think he only has like 13 fights. So that's my point right there, is like, just bring these guys along progressively as opposed to putting them in situations where they could fall flat on their face. Bosh. You see what I'm saying? That's just my personal opinion on that. So it's not that I don't think Moses Itamas can be good. I just don't think that he needs to be rushed to greatness. Let him just move accordingly, and then we'll actually get to see who he was or who he is. And then I think by this time next year, you know, then put him in the ring with a Bacoli or a Joseph Parker or a Jit Caballel. Hell, I think it'll even be more appropriate for him to get the winner of Fabio Wardley versus Justice Hooney than it would be to throw him in the ring with a Martin Bacoli or Philip Hergovich or Joseph Parker. That's just my personal opinion on that, man. Y'all let me know what y'all think about that. I'm not convinced of Moses Itamas yet, but I'm not supposed to be, because I'm not the one that tries to bring up these hype trains and then shit on people when they fail. You know, just let him move accordingly, and then I think that, you know, that's the appropriate thing to do, and he will blossom if he's going to blossom. But at the same time, too, don't baby him too much. But I don't think that Jermaine Franklin or Otto Wallin fight, I don't think that's babying them, you know, or even the winner of Fabio Wardley and Justice Hooney. I think that's a next step to his career progression, in my personal opinion. Y'all let me know what y'all think about that. Do you think Moses Itamas is the goods? Do you think he should be in the ring with the likes of Joseph Parker, Martin Bacoli, or hell, even a champion like Daniel Dubois and Alexander Usyk, or former champions like Anthony Joshua? Y'all let me know what y'all think about that, because the rankings would justify that. I just think that he shouldn't be rushed, man. That's my personal opinion. Y'all let me know what y'all think about that. Don't forget to smack that like button. But most importantly, remember, with God, we can do anything. Without God, we're nothing. The doctor's out. Peace. From the hood to college, both worlds they had to meet. 6 degrees between us, so cold we're about to freeze. But we're Florida boys, hot takes, we bring the heat. We're moving the culture, the engineers to the streets.